Hello, my name is Dr. Atif Ghani. I am currently a tutor at the Royal College of Art in London, England. In 2018, I tried virtual reality for the first time. I was quickly enthralled by the possibility of this new immersive technologies and the potential of empathy in enabling a new, more dynamic form of interaction and learning. One of the key concepts in the use of immersive technologies is the sense of being there or presence. It is this sense of presence that academics and others have suggested is the basis upon which a feeling of empathy is created with the characters that we see inside of VR. Unlike film, with its progressive linear sequences and its singular narrative or truth, I saw in VR a place where content could be presented and learners could learn in a more embodied or active sense through a more spatial presentation of objects and environments. My first VR project was originally a knife crime project, exploring ideas of presenting knife crime scenarios and role play, only to realize the key insight was not about walking in the shoes of perpetrators or victims of knife crime, but rather providing windows into communities affected by knife violence. For us, the Martha Street experience was meant to be an advocacy piece where we would show the experience to local politicians and police to provide them with a greater insight into community sentiment. We would use the occluded and undistracted nature of VR strategically to speak to people in a focused way for 12 minutes about knife crime violence and its effect on members of this community. The film would premiere in October 2020 at the London Film Festival Extended Realities program and actually go on to win several international awards. In 2020, our active learning project, Nexus, a virtual gathering pictured here on the left, was the runner-up in the Cultural Miles Fusion Prize. The Nexus looked at the use of an immersive virtual learning environment to showcase asynchronous group and active learning strategies in delivering fusion skills for young learners between 15 and 17 years of age. Fusion skills combine education, arts, design, technology, and business, reflecting how life is transformed by the fusion of these disciplines, generating opportunities for new learning, new businesses, products, and services. In March 2021, we also ran a Newham Youth Climate Emergency Assembly during the heart of a COVID lockdown. This is pictured on the right as a wholly avatar-based virtual learning offering. Here, we were able to provide a solution where groups of young learners were able to gather and explore known and unknown worlds with fellow learners, specialists, and educators together in VR, all from the safety of their home, school, or youth club. Our approach to immersive content production and learning is interdisciplinary and multimodal, employing virtual reality as walk-around experiences and as 360 videos, augmented reality, pictured here on the left, as part of heritage trails with relevant visuals and a strong audio component, digital galleries as immersive virtual learning environments where items and objects can be curated and learners can virtually walk around and engage with these assets in more individualized manners and as groups. This is a screen grab from our immersive virtual learning environment and VR experience. Millennium Mills, feeding Edwardian London. This experience is looking at the global emergence of industrial farming and its supply chain, beginning in the Royal Docks in London at the end of the 19th century, but then journeying over to Montreal, then to the wheat farms of Saskatchewan. The objective of our experience is to build a multi-perspective, active, and therefore decolonial way of understanding the emergence of global grain trade, where we reveal the intended and unintended consequences from this early form of globalized food supply for London's population at the turn of the 20th century. I should add that the digital gallery is basically structured as a series of rooms that take the user or learner through a journey from the Royal Docks and the Millennium Mills building in London through to Montreal, then through using railway to Saskatchewan, and then onto the farms of Saskatchewan. Millennium Mills itself was actually one of 4 coal-fired grain mills in the UK. 2 of these massive mills were located in the Royal Docks, one in Birkenhead near Liverpool and one in Newcastle in the northeast. Each mill would mill all the wheat germ to produce all the white flour to make white bread for all of Britain at the turn of the century and up until 1930. Before 1890, most flour was milled through a network of smaller stone-based water or windmills based throughout London and the British countryside. Millennium Mills, again pictured here from an aerial photo taken in 1930, represented an innovation, in particular, the use of steam technology to enable the emergence of industrial-scale food production. These large mills ran 24 hours a day, 365 days a week. Large industrial mills were employing steam power to achieve scale of production. Steam power stacked mills use gravity to allow the grain to flow over stories of this massive structures, to flow down through smaller and smaller gaps, becoming progressively finer and finer flour. Grain milling, in part due to its scale of production and size of this new industry, would increasingly take control of would be taken in control by a small number of companies and individuals. As part of our narrative, rather than exploring the singular strong man of history approach, where his ability to feed all of Britain and how his generational family wealth should be consecrated, we chose to explore the supply chain and look at where the grain came from and what the dynamics of production were in grain production at that time. One thing which emerges is London's merchant banking sector, which had extended its reach of investment into the colonies. It was investing heavily into farming infrastructure to supply a growing British demand for flour. This industrial farming process allowed for the emergence of the commodities capital market and the grain futures as a model of trading by the mid-1900s. We have in this moment the rise of globalization, where the colonies are providing British industry with an endless supply of raw material. An interesting example of this early globalization would be Peak-Friens biscuits. The biscuit company had established its factory, also known as Biscuit Town, in southeast London in the area known as Bermondsey in 1866. There, In Bermondsey or in Biscuit Town, Canadian wheat milled at Millennium Mills would be mixed with sugar from the West Indies, processed at Silvertown, fruit from the Mediterranean, chocolate from West Africa, and tin from Malaysia. This would be transformed and produced in Bermondsey and then shipped back to the colonies in Canada, Africa, India, Malaysia, and Australia. Raw materials from the colonies would be taken and produced into a premium value-added product and then sold back to the colonies as a taste from home. In Canada, we find another set of massive towers or grain elevators. These grain elevators employed steam technology in the form of an elevator hoisting wheat germ in bulk from farmers at ground level and then using gravity to drop the wheat germ into railway grain hoppers. This enabled farmers to shift from selling sacks of wheat to enabling them to sell wheat by the ton. Grain farming would become a more industrial process of collecting, measuring, and transporting wheat germ. But there is an even darker story here. Prior to the arrival of the early settlers onto the prairies of Canada, in particular, free farms that were being given away to European farmers in the late 19th century, mid to late 19th century, we find Aboriginal or Canada's First Nations peoples who were living on this land, surviving on their principal protein-rich foodstuff, the bison. The bison were killed by these early settlers, initially for their fur, then for their bones as fertilizer, and then seen as a pest to farming, and then finally as a form of recreation. Buffalo runners could kill up to 5,000 bison a day. The First Nations people of Canada experienced mass starvation and death. The Canadian government promised Aboriginal communities quality land to farm, new education resources, and healthcare facilities if they moved to selected reservations. The Native communities, in desperation, agreed and moved to these reservations. Treaties were signed, but the Canadian government never delivered on their side of the agreements. These vacated lands were then given away to mostly new European and American settlers as free land to farm. Historians in Canada now accept this global manipulation of First Nations people as a form of cultural genocide. Our experience, our immersive experience around Millennium Mills, is able to show a range of perspectives on the growth of food technologies and global patterns of the production and consumption in Britain from the late 19th century and early 20th century. How Millennium Mills, as one of the 4 coal-fire mills, was able to feed Britain's industrial revolutions, and how Britain was already living beyond its means and needing to leverage new raw materials from its colonies. How steam technology was critical in the development of industrial farming, along with the capital from the City of London, all of which being used to feed all parts of the world. But a key insight of our exhibition and our experience is to show the need to farm wheat in the prairies of Canada was not there to feed Canadians, but it was necessary to feed the people of Britain. In developing immersive heritage content, we aspire to present digital exhibits that enable the learner to step back, however briefly, to a different lived reality from the past. In VR, the learner feels as though they're in a multi-room digital gallery with works on the walls, presented in scale, creating a sense that you are present, like you are actually in a museum, a museum like the Museum of the Docklands in London. Practically, our object learning approaches include working in groups of 6 to 8 students in 30 to 40-minute sessions, exposing them to the technologies that I've been mentioning and discussing, that being virtual reality, augmented reality, the metaverse or mixed reality experiences, and video games. Looking at these approaches, using our bespoke immersive East London industrial heritage content. Here we've got a still of some young students from an East London girls' school trying in different groups our immersive experiences as part of our object learning offering. Most of our work is web-based and accessible through a single URL, using optimized graphics and ideally with a minimum of downloads. Our experiences are designed to be platform agnostic and therefore accessible through PCs, Chromebooks, phones, tablets, iPads, as well as in virtual reality. Much of our work to date has been location specific. As our focus has been on the industrial and cultural history of West Ham and the Lower Lee Valley, or the Royal Docks in East London, as a result, we have been working heavily in conjunction with the London Borough of Newham. Like Ill Manners before it, mentioned in the previous class, our work in Newham recognizes issues of social and economic deprivation that exists across this London borough. We are conscious of the notions of digital poverty and the lack of access to new technologies as modes to deliver learning and skills. In presenting our active learning content to young learners, many of whom will have often shown little or no initial interest in public history, we use local public history to showcase the impact of immersive technologies. We also attempt to reveal these technologies as a form of personal expression and potential as modes of formal education and future employment. I know from experience that some of our students have gone from being reclusive, cameras off learners situated in the background of video calls to active participants to public spokespeople for using immersive technologies. To date, we have had over 10,000 people try one part or another of our experience since 2019, when we first started making this type of immersive heritage content. The majority of our people still have not tried VR, or put another way, the majority of people who try our VR experiences will be trying VR for the very first time. Rather than the ultimate empathy machine, as suggested by Chris Milk, immersive technologies can provide us with the opportunity to present the messiness, conflicted, or complex nature of decision-making when looking at the historical past. This ideally can build towards complex ways to look into the future. I am trying to build an approach which is much more object-based or asset-based, an approach which is more dynamic, revealing a breadth of human agency and perspectives. I see my work as revealing underlying contradictions, intended and unintended consequences, and one that presents absences, resulting in complex multiple narratives rather than simplified binary understandings. Unlike film, with its progressive linear narrative sequences and embedded logocentric notions of a singular truth to be found within the text, emergent immersive technologies can allow the viewer to actively learn, forming questions and then looking for answers.